in the financial innovation space for some time now. My experience in that space has spanned, I think, originally working on bringing cloud banking infrastructure to smaller banks and credit unions at Encino, and then later on joining the World Economic Forum, where I worked in blockchain, crypto, CBDC, stablecoin, so all things digital assets. That was a very interesting experience to be sort of at the forefront of that and really shaping how both the industry and policymakers understand those technologies and lay the groundwork for it. And I think we are still laying the groundwork for it, as you've seen recently with stablecoins and the Genius Act. We still have so much to do in terms of enabling these emerging technologies such that they become embedded really into the core financial system. And most recently, I've been working on generative AI, which all came to us right in late 2022 when OpenAI brought ChatGPT onto the scene. And I think that it's something that has come to stay. And I think that, we can see that from the uptake. And so what I want us to delve into here is how do we leverage the technology for the purpose of really calibrating and accelerating financial access. It's not just a conversation of financial inclusion in terms of, oh, the poor parts of the world. I don't really believe in those dichotomies, so to speak. It's really about looking at the current financial system and seeing where people are underserved. It could be middle class people who are earning a very good income, $80,000 or more a year, but are not really leveraging that income right as much as they could because they lack the knowledge to whether to invest properly or save properly or manage their mortgage payments, like all of those things. It also could be lower income populations who are making, the traditional less than $1 a day we hear when we talk about the poorer areas of the world, or even in a place like the US, making $10,000 a year. There are people who make that little. How do you stretch that dollar? How do you make sure that dollar is working for you, or whatever other currency? So that's really what I want us to delve into here, and see how the capabilities that generative AI offers, as Lori outlined, can help us with that democratization, with that access, with that inclusion, so such that the financial system is not only sort of, serving those who are already really critically embedded and understand how to navigate it, but is welcoming more people right into sort of its space, and helping those people to grow in a way that is mutually beneficial for individuals as well as the financial institutions, right? Because at the end of the day, institutions are looking at growth, they are looking at their bottom line, but at the same time, that should not be divorced from how do you help people, how do you help people navigate and understand and benefit from a system such that it is mutually beneficial. But to begin with, this figure really struck me, and this is really where I predicate my thesis on, which is that a lot of what we see pertaining to AI, generative AI, or any technologies generally, right, are sort of these figures telling us what they will contribute or what they stand to contribute to the global economy. But those figures don't necessarily delve into how those contributions will be experienced and by whom those contributions will be experienced, right? And so that's where I, had to peel back the layers to start asking myself the question, like, okay, by 2030, we might potentially gain 15.7 trillion, added to the global economy through AI. But who is going to gain from that? And how is that going to change things for the people who actually really need the economy to rebalance? So what is generative AI? I think by now we all know what it is. It essentially generates content, right, in response to users' input. And that content can come in many different forms, including text, generating code, audio, image, video, and other 3D or specialized type of content. And the great thing about generative AI is that it is both input and output. And so that gives us a lot of room to innovate. The ways in which value is essentially therefore derived from generative AI are mostly in terms of efficiency and productivity, right? So we can see here, I got this from Deloitte. Most of it is in terms of cost reduction, bringing efficiencies to the process, and then therefore deriving more growth within the company and broadly speaking across the economy. And so what's been happening in the financial system and how has it been impacting the financial system? As someone coming from within the financial system, I would say that, by and large, a lot of the innovation has been focused on how to utilize generative AI to drive operational efficiency, especially from the internal point of view. So that might be, an AI assistant taking notes on meetings like this for advisors and being able to summarize that, generate insights, and and then trigger next steps. Some of it might be, summarizing reports, right? So for example, there are lots of reports issued on, a yearly basis by all of these big banks, and there's a lot of insights there that people don't necessarily, have the time to read through every single word of, and, generative AI can be used in that light. It's also been used. There've been test cases for call centers. How can it streamline call center efficiency in terms of either responding directly to customer inquiries over the phone, for example, or even like say for older population. This is something that we were thinking about at Deutsche Bank, being able to sort of move money from one account to another by dialing in as opposed to using a mobile app, because again, based on the demographic you're looking at, people might be more inclined towards one thing or the other. And then also for call center sort of associates, how can it also help them when they don't necessarily know the answers to questions? Can they use a chat GPT like interface to query and get an answer while customers on the phone, and they need to give them an answer which they themselves don't know? So these are some of the type of use cases that we have seen. I would say that a lot of things right now are still in the proof of concept phase, and it's not something that has been rolled out 100% across the bank, or that or across banks, or something that a lot of financial institutions are relying on to run the show. But these are the sort of pilots that we are seeing in financial services. And so therefore, the use cases span virtual assistant, as I talked about, research and insight generation, risk management, a lot of fraud and compliance use cases, such as like detecting anomalies in data, in customer inputs, also being able to perhaps read through a lot of the regulatory reporting that comes as well, and helping banks to stay up to date with the changes that they need to make, things of that nature, marketing and personalization, customer service automation, and content generation. I think that, we very much know about that aspect of generative AI. And so my thesis here, or the question behind my thesis was, can we move beyond efficiency and productivity gains? Those gains are in themselves really good. And actually, in terms of financial services and even financial access, when banks become more operationally efficient, it reduces, the need for them to make profit on sort of the lower income segments, and therefore it creates an opening to capture more of that, sort of bottom of the pyramid segment. But that's not enough, right? Because that is not intentional. We're not intentionally cultivating an environment to foster financial inclusion. So in spite of the fact that efficiency and productivity is very good, how can we actually drive further gains in financial services using generative AI? And so the question was, how can we use generative AI to create new value and new access to financial services? As you would have seen in the article, I talked about the fact that globally, 1.4 billion adults remain unbanked globally. And this number, I think, hides a lot, because even though there has been a significant gain in a number of banked adults, right? So going up, to, I think we've gained probably about 1 billion since 2011 in terms of, having access to a bank or mobile money account. These are just basic transactions, right? And I think that that does not actually help in terms of, moving the needle, right, when it comes to financial inclusion, in terms of how can people utilize financial services to better their lives. It's one thing to be able to receive money when, you receive remittances, or you're able to transfer to a vendor when you need to pay, something with like your M-Pesa account. But that's not enough. That's not changing anyone's life. That's not changing their status quo. It's just helping them move money from one place to another. So how do we go beyond that, and how could Gen AI help with that? So I think that there are 4 different drivers of inclusion that Gen AI provides. And one of them is financial education and literacy. So the capabilities, again, of Gen AI, for example, you can, you know, you can query Gen AI on pretty much anything. Obviously, the accuracy of the information that it gives you is going to depend on the data it's been trained on. But in a case where it's been trained on accurate, financial information, we should be able to use it to educate people in terms of finances, how to manage finances, how to grow money, etc., and increase their literacy levels. I also believe that it can be used, for wealth building mechanisms, really piggybacking off of the first thing. I think it can be used as well to increase digital accessibility. So that's in terms of, removing language barriers, removing disability barriers. And it can also be used to increase digital education and literacy. That's in terms of even teaching people how to use certain interfaces or technologies. So I'm not going to go into each of these because that we delve really deep into that in the article already. One thing the article did not touch on are the risk factors, right? And that's something that's really important from the perspective of both the financial institution as well as the regulators when it comes to these sorts of innovations. And I would say that a lot of the reason why we have not seen customer facing innovations with generative AI yet is because of the risk that it potentially poses, and because there isn't yet comprehensive regulation that addresses or provides parameters on how financial institutions should mitigate against these risks. And so it's a gray space. So we already know that, there's the potential for generative AI to exacerbate existing biases depending again on how it is built, the data it's trained on, and if there is sort of a human in the loop or not, and what the consequences of that, ultimately become. That can therefore actually further increase exclusion within the financial system and inequity. And so we have to again build from a very conscious mindset about these potential risk factors. There's also the risk of inaccuracies, again, based on the data that it's been trained on and sort of how exactly it's parsing through that. There's cybersecurity risks, right, which most technologies pose in terms of, again, hacking and all of the things that come with cybersecurity. There are fraud risks, right, which again would end up harming the end consumers that we would hope to help through such innovations, right? Losing money is not something that we want to do to people who are already at the bottom of the pyramid, right? And then there's privacy concerns as well in terms of what sort of data would be shared with these systems, and how exactly do we safeguard that data. In terms of mitigating these risks, I think that again, the risks have to be thought about upfront, and we have to build with a responsible innovation mindset that takes into account the ethical questions surrounding all of these innovations, the regulatory measures as well, and governance, which is the process of continuously sort of and iteratively how would I say, supervising these activities. So, the future that I see is one where people, irrespective of race, of religion, of socioeconomic background, all have, sort of access to financial services such that, we can have a more level economy. So that's the aspiration. And I think that generative AI